Hi, Ifunanya. Thank you so much for joining the Regfyl podcast. I'm so glad to have you on here. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure interacting with you prior to getting on this recording, and then hopefully you're able to share some of your knowledge, some of your expertise with our listeners today. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Tunde. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, cool. So you are the vice president of legal. Am I getting that? Vice president legal and compliance for Zone, one of the premier fintechs in Nigeria. So can you just kind of tell us a bit about your journey into compliance and legal advisory? Kind of what drew you to this field? And then, I mean, you've worked around across multiple industries because I think you've worked in the obviously banking, fintech, I think telecoms, and maybe oil and gas as well. So, kind of like, how did you get attracted to the industry in legal and compliance generally, and what has your experience been in the last, I think, 14 years or so of your professional career? It is
Yeah,
14 years, correct? 15
15.
in the last 15 years. So yeah, if you can just talk us to that as well.
Okay, so I think I'll talk about my initial interest and how that interest developed or rather evolved over time.
Yeah.
So I began my career as a practicing attorney. I'm a lawyer. So I was working in a law firm, but just shortly after, I think about 2 years into practice, I transitioned into a role as an in-house legal counsel in the bank. And in the bank, I developed corporate expertise. I developed expertise in corporate law
Yeah.
and gained invaluable industry exposure. Over time, my responsibilities expanded from just pure legal advisory to board secretarial roles and compliance oversight. Now, speaking of compliance, initially, especially when I was in my junior mid management level, my journey into compliance was driven by a passion to safeguard financial ecosystems, right? And curb financial crime. So, we all know the journey of fighting financial crime starts from onboarding. And I just always wanted to be at the forefront of KYC reviews, due diligence, to analyze the way people attempt to penetrate into the banking system to penetrate fraud. I mean, I just found it quite intriguing. I always enjoyed using a risk-based approach to review KYCs and analyze data. It just makes you curious and you just want to investigate further. Then over time, I think my interest in compliance deepened as my career progressed. I developed a keen interest in the innovations emerging from fintech startups that we have today. I
Yeah.
mean, starting from when I remember one time in 2018, I was seated on my desk in the bank. And you know how, I mean, we always have this routine in compliance where we click on the CBN circular just to see if there's any new regulation. So I remember when sometime in 2018 an exposure draft dropped. And when I read that exposure draft, I just knew that it was time for my skills and experience to have a greater impact. So when I read that exposure draft, it was on the new license categories for PSPs, right? Essentially, what CBN was saying then was that they have observed that banks have started to partner with fintechs, in processing payments, and this has given them the need to supervise the activities and the business of those fintechs. And therefore, they were releasing new license categories. So you see the switches, you see the PSSPs, the PTSPs, and all of that. So I just knew that it was time and
Yeah.
I would have greater impact in that kind of fast-paced and dynamic environment. And that was what led me to venture into the fintech industry.
Okay.
Then ultimately, I would say that I am quite enthusiastic about the seamless coexistence of compliance and innovation. I mean, I enjoy the process of understanding a business model and then plugging in compliance into that business model. I particularly enjoy engagements around product compliance
Mm-hmm.
and operational compliance. Reason being that there's a general misconception that these two can't coexist,
Yeah.
and I'm always happy to correct that impression. correct that mindset.
Yeah.
So when I'm in the room and we're discussing products, or when I'm in the room and we're discussing operations,
Yeah.
I always want to ask the necessary questions. I always want to also be there to provide assurance that things are being done correctly, right? So, for instance, now with the recent CBN circulars, I think in the last 6 to 7 months, you see that CBN requires you to route your transactions through a PTSA. You see that CBN requires you to upload data daily on the IDRS platform that I think is hosted in NIBS. So you just want to look and you just want to see that the product has been designed to automatically comply.
Yeah.
So we don't want to have to come and start asking questions. We already know that these things have been built as rules on the smart contract, which obviously our blockchain technology, we program smart contracts based on regulations and then deploy them on the blockchain and they start to run automatically. So we want to be sure that these regulatory requirements are already programmed on the blockchain, so that they just happen seamlessly and we don't have any issues around operational compliance or product compliance. And we all know that the fintech industry thrives on disruption. However, for this disruption to have a lasting and transformative impact, it must exist within clear and compliant boundaries. And that's where I always come in. That's what I'm here for.
I mean, it's interesting that you said something very interesting. Thank you so much for the kind of taking us through your career and the things that sparked your interest and have basically continued to engage you in the space. You said two things that I thought were interesting, and for me, I mean, I'm excited about these things as well because that's what we do at Regfyl. But for me, it was there's always this kind of pushback. I mean, you say compliance and you say innovation. Sometimes they seem like strange bedmates. Some people suggest that for innovation to be true innovation, you can't really wait for compliance. That almost compliance has to catch up. There's some people in school of thought that you seem to be in where they can go hand in hand at the kind of the ideation and the product building stage. I think there's a third concept in that whole conversation, which is around growth. And so one of the challenges that a lot of fintechs, a lot of new entrants into the financial system always communicate is the fact that to be compliant, they're not able to innovate as quickly as they should, or they're not able to grow as fast as they should. So in your experience, and because you guys and you personally kind of sit in that intersection where you're driving and pushing for change, for innovation, but also trying to push for compliance in that innovative process, how do you balance both business growth and innovation on one side, and then compliance, especially in an industry that is moving so quick? How do you balance it personally, and how do you kind of advise others to kind of to straddle those two things?
Okay, so I think that for most fintechs out there, when you hear them say compliance will stifle the growth, I think it's a very uninformed statement.
Okay.
Because you just don't have the mindset to comply. If you're looking out to start off a business in financial services, first things first, you have to find the license category that would match the business you're looking to deploy. And in finding the appropriate license category, there are permissible activities, which I believe more often than not, they don't have anything to do with the business groups. If you're looking to perform payment services, for instance, maybe under a PSSB license, you should already know. I mean, you should have a compliance professional advising you. So you should already know what your permissible activities are and what they aren't. And what I think is that fintechs have not actually set out to contravene regulatory requirements. I think what most fintechs have actually done is explore gray areas where regulators haven't really specifically addressed, and explore those areas to deploy services. I would say, for instance, a microfinance bank, for instance, we all know that most digital banks we have in Nigeria operate with a microfinance banking license. Now, if I pick up a unit tier 2 license, the unit tier 2 license allows me to operate in a rural area and have just one office. I would have that license and then I build an app and then people can create accounts all over the world. Regulation says unit tier 2 must have a physical structure, just one office in a rural area. However, it doesn't say that I can't build an app. It doesn't say that anybody, like only people within a particular community can download the app. So what I see most fintechs do is not actually break regulation. No, it's just explore gray areas, which I think it's okay. Now that will take us to another discussion where I feel that regulators, though they are receptive, I think they need to do better in catching up, right? So if I was to balance regulatory compliance and business growth, I think the first thing I would do is to just ensure that compliance is embedded at the product development stage. There should always be an experienced compliance person in the room. If you're starting up as a fresh startup, or if you are building a new product, whatever the case, please have someone in compliance sit in the room at that initial stage. It's never advisable for compliance to be seen as an afterthought, or for compliance to be seen as that box that you just need to tick at some point in your building stage. So this will just help us to avoid any frictions. You can imagine building a product to a certain stage and you think you're ready to launch, and then at that point compliance is telling you this may not work because it's contravening regulations. So it would have just been easier for everyone to sit it at the initial stage and build compliantly. At that point, if there's anything that probably might contravene regulation, it's easier to re-strategize at that point when it's necessary, as opposed to probably committing a lot of capital into building a product and then you realize that you can't deploy it, right? Or you deploy and then you risk regulatory fines or even risk losing your license. Another way I think we can balance business growth and regulatory compliance is through frequent regulatory engagement. So right here in Zone, we proactively engage regulators. The CBN, the NFIU, we always engage them, basically so that we can align our business model with regulations, and then just align with evolving rules. The CBN, I am a fan of the CBN, to be honest. Yes, I am a big fan.
Yes. Interesting.
Because when you engage them, unlike the general misconception that people have that CBN is just there to issue fines, they're actually there to help. They're excited about these products, and then when you engage them, they make you understand the mind of the regulator and where the regulator is going in the next 6 months. So that way you're already preparing yourself, just to reduce the amount of surprises you're going to have. Okay, we know that regulators will soon crack down on this. We know regulators will soon, so for instance, I think there was this NPC meeting that was held sometime last year, and the CBN governor was talking about the measures that they are putting in place to ensure that fintechs operate in a they were. I think Cardoso was talking about deploying, or rather, is deploying the word? Cardoso was talking about implementing or releasing a robust compliance framework for fintechs and digital banks, right? So you know that it's coming. Right? You know it's coming. So that way, through engagements, you just understand the mind of regulators, and it just helps you. It just guides you. A key factor is also automation. I think automation is key, right? So AI-driven compliance monitoring would help you to streamline compliance without necessarily slowing business operations.
In your experience since 2018, and I'll use 2018 as just a yardstick because let's call it that was the beginning of
2020 actually. That was when the license categories came out, but the exposure
draft. So when the exposure draft came out in 2018 to now, in your opinion, as someone has been in the industry for a very long time and was in the industry before that came out, so how has the regulatory environment for fintechs evolved over the last few years? Do you think that the regulators are doing enough to support fintechs? And obviously, at the end of that, like, what would you like to see? I'm sorry for giving you a three-in-one question, but I think they're kind of all related. So, yeah. So, any thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think that when it comes to AML CFT regulations, I think Nigeria has significantly improved, right? The NFIU, the CBN working together, they have significantly improved in the AML CFT framework. So I think in Nigeria now we're aligning, even though we're currently on the gray list, I mean, but looking over time, you would see that we're now aligning more to the FATF standards, or the FATF style, like, what do they call those bodies? FATF style, like, or something like that. So the GIABAs and
GIABAs, yeah.
Yeah, so you see that our frameworks now align better with those standards, right? And there's also greater scrutiny on ultimate beneficial ownership, PEPs, cross-border transactions. I mean, it's an amazing thing that the CBN and the NFIU are doing. I also think that real-time reporting and automated fraud detection systems have now become the norm, as opposed to being reactive towards fraud prevention. Now we have systems that are rule-based and curb these things in real time. I mean, you can't eradicate it 100%, but I would say the financial system in Nigeria, we've really come a long way and done remarkably well in, implementing AI-driven compliance monitoring, KYC, blockchain-based ID verification, compliance tools to really, really check money laundering and fraud at the same time. So I think that has just been an amazing thing. I would also say that there's been a shift. I think with the birth of fintechs and all the innovation that the fintechs bring, I think there's also been a mindset shift with the regulators, right? So the regulators have significantly moved away from rigid, rule-based approaches to compliance to risk-based approaches. So now you see CBN talking about cybersecurity frameworks, you see CBN talking about IT standards, because they understand that these things are equally important, right? As opposed to them just having guidelines on how you post transactions and do this. And so now things are more risk-based rather than being rule-based. So I think those are some of the biggest shifts that we've seen so far in compliance in the last couple of years.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess just to kind of riff off the back of that, a lot of the changes and the posture of the regulators, I think, is driven also by the nature of the innovation that is going on in the industry, but also the nature of the risks that are emerging in the industry, because the regulators are there to regulate but also to protect. So what are, in your opinion, what are the risks that you're seeing? What do you think are the biggest risks, the challenges that are coming up in the financial space currently?
So I think with the current digitization and the many disruptive technology solutions that we have in the fintech industry now, there is a big risk of data breaches. I think is one of the big risk, right? When fintechs out there do not comply with information security standards, they don't see it as, some of them won't see it as important. They'll ask you, I mean, I have conversations with some of my colleagues in the industry, and some of them will tell you some of their experiences and say that maybe a certain founder said, if CBN is not asking me for it at this point, please can we deprioritize it to a later time? So you see that people are not prioritizing information security, people are not prioritizing data protection frameworks or data protection laws. People are not even prioritizing AML and KYC guidelines, right? Some of them would think, oh, we don't want the customer thinking that it's too cumbersome. Hey, there's some fintechs out there that have really done remarkably well when it comes to complying with KYC KYC and onboarding requirements, and also made the whole process seamless and quick. Because I mean, when the fintechs and the tech companies started to operate, there's a practice that we observed, we compliance professionals, we observed that so many of them start to operate even before they get a license.
Yeah.
So some of them, it's not really their fault, because sometimes the CBN can just have delays. I mean, there's sometimes in the CBN we hear things like there's a license freeze, right? And it won't be fair to tell a business not to operate because there's a license approval freeze. So you see some of them, they start to partner with other licensed entities just so that they can operate. I mean, it happens, but I think it's very risky. And why do I say it is very risky? Because some of these measures, we know some of the measures that we have to go through to get these licenses, right? And we just know that most of the time, the level that the licensed entity would use is way not as detailed as, or is way less than that of the regulators, right? So the regulators will ask you for a lot of things, ranging from corporate governance, just to be sure that there will be, a proper structure in place to help sustaining the business objectives. They would check that you even have the capital requirements to be able to run your operating costs. They check a lot of things. They check your policies, but some of the fintechs, the regulated entities, may not be that detailed in checking all of this. So I think there's a major risk there, that there are a lot of fintechs out there operating without licenses, and it's really risky. So these are some of the risks that I think we face today in Africa.
Thank you so much, Ifunanya. And I guess so I come to you today. I know obviously you're VP of Legal and Compliance for Zone, but maybe we go to a conference and I run into you and I say, "Hi, Ifunanya, my name is Tunde. I'm about to start my fintech, my own digital bank. I want to make sure that I do the right things from day one. So can you just give me some suggestions and advice on how I structure my compliance from day one? What kind of advice would you be giving to me? And use Tunde as a representation of all the other guys that might be listening in now and are trying to set up their own fintechs and thinking about compliance."
Okay, so you meet me in my capacity as VP Legal and Compliance, right?
Yeah, but just not for Zone, but just generally, you're just advising a struggling founder that is looking for advice from a senior person in the legal and compliance space.
So I would say, my number one advice is always, as a founder, I know that the first thing you're thinking about are your engineers to build the product. But I would implore you to please also consider hiring an experienced compliance manager at the point, like give that particular hire the same level of priority that you would give to hiring your engineers. You may be looking to hire 10, 20, 50 engineers. That's fine, but just hire 1 or 2 experienced compliance people, because at that pre-launch phase, you need a dedicated compliance lead to help to set up the right structures. And if you set up the right structures from the beginning, you have greater chances to long-term success, as opposed to setting up and then having to re-strategize, because at some point you realize that regulation will not allow you to proceed. I would also advise you to empower your compliance team members by investing in automation. So please automate your KYC onboarding processes, automate your transaction monitoring, fraud detection systems. Just invest in automations early enough. Don't think about it like one of your 5-year long-term goals. No, it should be one of the things that your quick wins. Okay, we want to invest in automation. We want to be able to track. Like I said, the first step to financial crime is onboarding. You just have to be sure that you are doing onboarding the right way, and you are also meeting up with current trends in onboarding practices. I would also advise you as the founder, and not just, so sometimes most founders would leave regulatory engagements to the compliance people. I don't think it's the best. I mean, yeah, the compliance people would always engage, but as a founder and you just want to start a business, I think you should also be open to regulatory engagements, right? And don't be reactive. Always be proactive. I mean, it's always a beautiful thing to be on the good side of regulators. Like when they look at your company, oh, those guys, they're good. Yeah. It would help you get your approvals faster. Like I can speak from experience. It would help you get your approvals faster. Like build relationships with people in the CBN, people in the NFIU, and not just these bodies, even people in the tax, FIRS. Just build relationships with these people, and that way you're able to just stay ahead of evolving policies. And then I think the last thing I would advise a startup founder, culture. I believe having a compliance culture always cascades from the top to the top of the pyramid. So as a founder, just ensure that whatever you do, you encourage the compliance team to successfully build a scalable compliance culture, right? Embed compliance thinking across the teams. When your team members, when other members of the management team hear you talk, it's important that they hear you say, okay, we want to do this thing this way, but will regulation allow us to route it? Will regulation allow us to route it directly without it passing through PTSA? So when you're talking, it should just flow naturally that you're also aware and conscious that there are also regulatory requirements that would affect whatever it is you're looking to build. So from product team, operations, customer support, everybody should be speaking the same language. Like, it's so amazing. Like, I have team members here in Zone, when they talk, I am always very excited when I sit and I listen. And they're just talking and they're telling you, okay, so we want to do this, but we can't charge this because CBN will not allow us to charge more than a certain percentage. And it just makes me happy, right? Because it just shows the overall culture. It just shows that there is a compliance culture within the organization, and there is nothing more beautiful than having that culture. It saves you a lot of headache, and it just also demonstrates to regulators that you guys are just interested in being on the good side of regulation. So
really, 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 really important points. The one that I wanted to double click on, and I'm not, I understand a lot of fintechs when you're starting, because building a fintech company is a very, very capital intensive operation. And so what people tend to do is they try and see where they can, I don't want to use the word cut corners, but where they can reduce their capital outlay. And so a lot of people think that, okay, yes, I want to have somebody in compliance, and so it's like a tick box. Okay, I have somebody in compliance. But one word that you said a lot in this conversation so far: experienced. I'm not calling anybody out, but I do know some companies that they get somebody who maybe they just if they have a legal background, maybe they got called to the Nigerian bar 18 months ago or 1 year ago, and they say, okay, well, that's their head of compliance now, because they just want to have somebody there. So for you, when you say why do you emphasize on this point about the compliance person being experienced? Why is that experience important?
Okay, so I always emphasize on that experience because I think that there are a lot of complexities around fintech products. There are a lot of complexities, and when you have an experienced person probably has seen scenarios play out once or twice in the past, and is able to tell you how they were able to navigate it, right? An experienced person is able to tell you, I mean, you may not be able to preempt the mind of regulators, but an experienced person is able to tell you what can fly with the regulators and what can fly based on past experiences. Yeah. An experienced person will be able to tell you this is likely what the consequences of doing this would be. I mean, you just cannot hack it, right? So I just think you can't hack it. You can't hack experience. You can't hack industry knowledge. So you would be doing yourself a major disservice if you just look at that role as just ticking the box. We just put somebody, and then even the regulators have guidelines around. It's just because I think CBN is yet to release a framework around fintechs, digital bank. But if you look at guidelines on banking, if you look at guidelines on MFBs, you would see that when it comes to staffing, you have to have, there are certain rules that are very important, and CBN will specify the number of years that the person occupying that role must have. Right? So there's a reason for that. So I just think you can't hack your way into, you really can't.
I 100% agree.
Yes.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, you spent a lot of time. You are one of the leaders in the space. I mean, if I'm just starting out as a young professional looking to break into fintech compliance, and I want to be able to build that level of experience and expertise over time, what are the skills that you think that I should focus on as I start my career, as I start that journey?
First of all, you must understand the regulation. Read the regulations. Read, and understand them. Right? So understand CBN regulations, understand AML CFT laws, understand global compliance frameworks as well, like the FATF 40, laws around the NDPR, GDPR. Just read, and just gain knowledge. Right? So you gain the knowledge. You now have to now understand the industry as well. So just read about digital payments, blockchain blockchain technologies and how they work. Just read to understand. This is very crucial in today's compliance landscape, to be honest. Compliance has evolved from just understanding account opening, transaction monitoring, CBN inspection, gather documents. Compliance has evolved. I think also you should be data driven, right? So have skills in analytical skills, have skills in analyzing data, transaction monitoring, fraud detection, risk analysis, skills around that to be valuable. Then I would say last but the most important skill you need in all your gettings, get communication and stakeholder management skills.
Okay.
I mean, compliance isn't just about the things I had mentioned earlier, right? You must be able to translate regulations into business-friendly strategies. You are speaking to people who are not in compliance. You have to be able to get their buy-in. Being able to explain complex compliance issues to non-compliance team members it requires skill. Right? So you shouldn't just be that person who comes into a room and says, no, it can't fly. Regulation says we must do. You just be seen as, people would even want to add you to meetings, to be honest. However, if you develop the skill of saying, I think even in life generally, sometimes it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. So if you develop the skill of engaging them and making them understand that this is great, however, there's something that CBN has put in a recent circular that may not allow us to execute this way. We can, however, explore other ways and maybe give examples based on what regulation permits. I think anybody would be happy to listen to you and the solutions that you prefer. So I think stakeholder management and communication skills is basically the most essential, because I believe if every compliance person had that skill, there won't be that general misconception that compliance people were just there to kill business. I mean, I remember in my earlier years when I was a junior or mid-management staff in compliance, my mindset then was, I'm protecting the company. I'm protecting the business. I'm protecting the business. But hey, you're protecting a business that you don't understand. Right? How about that? You just need to go and understand the business. Go and learn the business model. That way, you just know how you plug in compliance strategies to that model. And trust me, anybody, no matter how fast-paced the person is, any founder, any product or operations person will be happy to work with you. I remember one advice that one of my previous supervisors, and he said, yeah, Ifunanya, it is good to protect the company from risks and all of that, but also be careful so that you do not protect the company from its own success. And it hits me, like, really, I really need to have the approach. It's part of the stakeholder management we're talking about, just have that approach to collaborate with your team members, and strategically plug in compliance strategies in a way that you get all their buy-in. So yeah, these are some of the few.
If you had a magic wand and you could change just one thing, only one thing, you had a magic wand, you had one wish to change something in the AML compliance landscape in not just Nigeria, in Africa, what would that thing be? What would you change?
I think in Africa compliance AML, I would say, can we just have a unified framework across Africa where if I'm in Nigeria, for instance, and I have this license, I have a particular license, say I have a PSSP license, right? I would want us to have a unified framework around compliance and AML standards, such a way that if I want to move to Kenya to start operations, I do not have to start over, right? There should just be something to probably validate. I know there will definitely be country-specific regulations, right? But it should just be minimal, because worldwide approach to fighting financial crime is largely universal.
Yep.
So why can't we have something universal within Africa to know that, okay, if you were able to qualify to get a license in this particular country, there should already be an assumption that when it comes to onboarding or standards around anti-money laundering and KYC, there should just be that assumption that you've complied with all of that. It should just be easy to operate in other parts of Africa without having to just start all over and not take cognizance of the fact that you have a license in Nigeria, you have a license in Ghana, and you have to just keep. I think it's too expensive to just have those processes fragmented in that manner. I think another thing I would like to change would be.
And you could change in Nigeria, this one. Maybe the second one you could be Nigeria.
Oh, yes. Another thing I'd like to change is license application processes. I think they need to be faster, to be honest. I think they need to be faster. I have seen a lot of fintechs. Currently, a lot of fintechs are suffering because they want to onboard, right? And for instance, they want to partner with maybe NIBS, they want to integrate to NIBS, or they even want to integrate to Zone. I would even use that as a case study. Some of the fintechs we see, maybe the license expired at a certain time and they've been in license renewal process with CBN for over a year. I mean, it's not fair. It's really not fair. Sometimes the CBN would give them a holding letter to say, we are reviewing. Why is it taking you so long to review their application? I mean, why don't you just have a standard timeline and stick to that timeline? So if I put in my license application in January, tell me that it will take 3 to 6 months. That's fine. And then in 3 to 6 months, you must have concluded your on-site assessments, concluded your internal reviews at the CBN, and you issue your license or your rejection, whatever the case may be. I think it's really unfair to just keep fintechs in a limbo. You see most of them, they're holding letters from the CBN to say that they're still reviewing. Some of them don't even have a response, and you know that they've put in their application or their application for renewal. So I think I would want to see faster license approval processes within the regulators.
Okay. Yeah. 100%. Those are really great innovations. I love the almost license portability across the African continent. I quite like that. If they could do that, that would be great. So yeah, hopefully you get your magic wand and you're able to solve that problem.
Well, let's see. I mean, let's see, right? Let's see. It's not impossible. I mean, with the way things evolve these days, it's not possible. So let's see. And then remember, we had this conversation here first.
Yeah. It's Ifunanya called it. She She's the Nostradamus of the fintech in Africa space. Fine, thank you so much, Ifunanya. I mean, for your insights, for your thoughts. If I'm listening to this and I want to follow more of what you share and what you talk about, where can I connect with you? Where can I follow you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it email? What is the best channel? Hopefully, no one comes to kind of stress you out and ask you questions every. But if I just want to like continue to be in your ecosystem, what is the best channel for me to follow what you do for now?
So I think it would be my LinkedIn,
Okay.
Ifunanya Anamelechi, my
Okay.
name. Yes, and then some of our initiatives, sometimes on our website as well, my official website, zonenetwork.com, we put out a lot of articles around regulatory compliance. We put out a lot of articles around transaction monitoring, put out articles around data analytics. We put out a lot of insightful data. So I think also check our website at zonenetwork.com
Yeah.
and follow us on LinkedIn as well at Zone.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Ifunanya. Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed this chat. Hopefully we can do it again soon. And yeah, really appreciate it.
Sure, same here today. Thank you for having me. I look forward to another podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.